you have to allocate some of your budget to say like, hey, this is an experimentation budget. And I think where marketers struggle is, how do I convince my CEO that I need like this budget and we're not really going to expect results out of it?
Percentage is important, because I have found that they don't care if you say like, oh yeah, we're going to do a bunch of like random stuff with podcasting. Then it's like, okay, but like, where are you spending that money from and how much time is that? But if you frame it, if we just take the Kyle Lacey number, if we say it's 30% or 20%, we're going to say, hey, 80% of our people and budget and time is going to be spent on like doing this stuff that is meant to hit our goals today. I need 20% to ensure that we're going to hit our goals tomorrow. That's how I would think about it. Exit. All right, Adam's here. He's got 4 kids and 2 dogs running around there somewhere. So we're going to, just a couple of dads talking B2B marketing. This is what the people want, right?
Yeah. If we make it without interruptions, it'll be a miracle, Dave.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Anyway, let's bring people up to speed for people who aren't familiar with you, just to hear your voice, put a name to it. Maybe give me an introduction to yourself and bring me up to speed on your background as a B2B marketing leader.
Yeah, so I've been in B2B marketing for a long time now. I previously led growth at G2 for about 2.5 years, and then led the marketing team at Help Scout. And the last year and a half or so, then was consulting, advising, and then recently at the start of this year, started an agency, Growth Union. We work with early stage startups, figuring out kind of all things growth. So yeah, that's kind of my journey. Like you said, I have 4 kids, 2 dogs here. So yeah, just happy to be on.
So so you've done a bunch of interesting things. G2, Help Scout. You've been all across the B2B marketing planet. Usually though, when somebody goes to start an agency, they have a particular way of thinking about things or doing things. I'm curious as somebody who has many times thought about starting an agency and I didn't end up doing it. I'm curious as to hear like what your thesis was. You know, like most people don't go start with a successful career in B2B marketing as a marketing leader. You know, you're not going to go start an agency and just kind of take everyone's work. We'll do anything, right? Pay us 20 grand a month, 15 grand a month, whatever it is. We'll go do everything. You got to have a specific thesis. Like what was your kind of framework and thinking that led to starting the agency, and what's kind of the playbook, if there is one that you're focused on?
Yeah, I would say like most products, I think usually come out of someone's frustration with like the experience they've had. And so for me, working with agencies, anytime in my career, I always tried to lean on them. Some were good, some were bad, but it was always like very point solution focused, right? There's a paid agency, there's a content agency, there's a backlink agency. And then lots of times the agencies are filled with agency people. And I don't mean that as a knock, but they've never been in the seat before as a B2B marketer. And I think there's a big disconnect sometimes, right, with what you're actually trying to accomplish. And so I found when you would work with agencies, a lot of times I'm trying to bring them along the journey or have them connect the dots with the other agencies and all this sort of stuff. And it always felt kind of silly to me because growth in B2B is never a one-channel sport. And so it's never just paid marketing. It's how your paid marketing works with your content and your brand and all these kinds of things. And there wasn't really anyone kind of coming in kind of holistically looking at it, right? There's lots of advisors and people like that and strategists, but nobody to actually do the execution work. And so we kind of come in and we help build kind of a growth strategy. Like if we were your VP of growth coming in, here's what we would do. And then we execute up to 3 initiatives at any given time, right? And so that's kind of the way our model works. So we're kind of channel agnostic. And I think the other thing is like, lots of paid agencies is they make money when you spend more money in paid channels, right? Because they're taking a percentage of your spend. Or content agency wants you to write more content articles because they make money off of it. And so it felt very misaligned with like what your outcome is as a business leader and what their outcomes are.
Yeah. Okay. I really like this because, I think it's easy to write on LinkedIn and talk about, oh, this thing works and this thing works. And I do it all the time. But what I love about the podcast is you get to go layers deeper and you're like, oh, this isn't really a definitive take. And I think it's kind of like communicating with somebody in Slack. Sometimes like it feels very direct, and then you actually hear my voice in person. You're like, oh, that's not how he delivered that message at all. And I think on LinkedIn, we hear things like, do this, not that. Here's how I did this and this worked for me, right? And I think the more through my own career and the more people that I've talked to now building Exit 5, I've spent how Lord knows how many hours talking to people like you and marketing leaders over the last 7 years. Hundreds of hours. It's nuts. And I'm able to pattern match and see a lot of these trends and themes. And one of the themes that I really strongly believe is that any channel can work. Podcasting works, TikTok works, YouTube works, SEO, they all work.
Yep.
But where most people fall down is the strategy. And I think it all comes back to like, I'll answer questions from people in the Exit 5 community. And I'm like, man, I hope people don't think I'm like a moron, because I always go back to giving like the simplest answers. But I do find that almost all the time, you've peeled back all the layers, it comes back to like, well, what's the strategy? Why
Yep.
are we doing this? What outcomes are we going to try to drive? Then that dictates the success. You know what I'm kind of like ranting about? Like you've seen this at a bunch of different companies. It's like, it's so easy to get obsessed over the tactics when it's like, actually, I can tell almost right away in talking to a founder and a marketing leader if they're going to be successful or not based on how they can articulate that strategy before we even look at the performance of any particular channel.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's like, especially like events, and you see it all the time, like you said on LinkedIn, where it's like events are dead, email marketing's dead, SEO is dead. And it's like, if all these things were dead, then how is it that, at G2 with events, we would go to trade shows and they were profitable for us? We were trying to go to as many trade shows as possible, right? And if emails were dead, how come there's other companies that are making tons of money off of it, right? And so I think it all comes down to the strategy and aligning what's your specific tactic within that channel? Because I think one of the things now, it's not dead, it's just harder. And so like when I was at Help Scout, it's help desk software. There's 300 companies, probably 400 companies today competing in that space, right? And so if you think about that for a moment, it's like, okay, doing paid advertising isn't a strategy. Doing email marketing isn't a strategy. All those companies are doing it, right? And so you really have like two options. It's like, how can I be either in the top 1% of people doing paid out of those 400 companies, or how do I do it differently or in a more unique way? And that's where I think like brand and growth and all these things really tie together, right? Because if you're just rolling out, generic Canva ads on LinkedIn, pushing everyone to a demo, and then you're like, LinkedIn doesn't work. It's like, well, I think the strategy is broken there.
I wrote that down. I love that you said it's not dead, it's just harder. And I was listening to Gary Vee talk with Kip and Kieran on Marketing Against the Grain, and he was talking about how when he first started doing email marketing for like his dad's wine shop or whatever, he was the only person doing email marketing, and so like his open rates were like 98%. And doesn't mean he was any good at it, he just was early in the channel. We go to today, there's companies in every vertical, every industry, every channel is flooded. And so like the strategy is more important. Maybe we can use this podcast today to like help people be more strategic and think about the strategy. So let's dive into some of the, you don't have to like give us a name of the company, but maybe like talk about a project you're working on now or recently doing. How can the people that listen to this, they want like the real specific and tactical advice, and I want to try to dig into like, all right, how can we, if we know that's true, if we know that growth is not a one channel sport, things are channels are not dead, it's just harder, how can we use this time to help people get more strategic and think about marketing strategy? Where does it start?
So for me, it starts with the leadership, right? Of like setting up a structure for the team to actually be willing to try new things. And so if you think about it for a second, is when do most marketing teams do their brainstorming? It's like after we miss Q3, it's like, oh shit, get everyone on a Zoom call. We got to figure out how we're going to hit this number. I can tell you firsthand, most people don't come up with the best ideas when it's like under pressure like that, right? They're going to go with whatever they think is safer. They're not going to throw out the wild idea that might just be burning $5,000 in marketing spend when you're in that situation. And so I think one of the big things is how you're structuring the team and how you're getting them to think creatively. So at G2 and at Help Scout, we basically had like an idea board in Asana where everyone would just dump ideas, good ideas, bad ideas. Like whenever you saw it, you saw inspiration for something. And once a month, we would go through that idea board and everyone would have to pitch their idea. It would be like a Friday afternoon, and everyone would just go in and pitch their ideas. Some of them were horrible, and I will always have the worst ones, kind of on purpose, right? To set the stage of like, there are no bad ideas, but you really want people thinking bigger. And then we would run at least 2 of those every sprint. So we worked in 2-week sprints, and every sprint we would run at least 2 tests. Sometimes they were smaller tests. Sometimes it was a bigger test in terms of like what we were testing. But really, it's like, what are we trying to test? How does it tie up to the bigger goal that we're trying to achieve? Like, which of our KPIs or OKRs or whatever you're measuring does this tie into? And then what's the MVP version of this launch? Because too many times marketers are, when we have a podcast, how are we going to promote it on all these channels? And how are we going to get it on LinkedIn and, YouTube Shorts and Instagrams? Like, how about you record one and put it on LinkedIn and see if anyone even likes it, right? I think like you get so far down the road of planning that it's like, it takes you 6 months before you even record a podcast episode. And you see that like in growth channels all the time where it's like, we need a strategy for Reddit. It's like, we'll just start running Reddit ads. That could be the simple strategy to start, right? And so I think the key is minimizing the test and making sure you're not allocating too many resources towards test. Because
this is great. I want to hop in here. So this is really good. So just giving the team, I feel like a key thing is like to have, it's like because you've had a dedicated space for this is why it works, right? It's like we want to encourage a culture of ideas, but they just go nowhere. They just go into the Slack ether or like the marketing. And I'm the number one culprit of this. Like I have more ideas than anybody. I would challenge anybody to have more marketing ideas. And I send them to the team. I get all excited. I'm like, oh, because I have very recency bias. Like I just did a webinar earlier today, and somebody talked about something on the webinar. I was like, yes, we got to do this. And I sent it to the team. I'm like, we got to do this. Now I'm talking to you. I'm going to get 3 ideas from you on this podcast. I'm like, yeah, we got to do that. And then I feel like I'm bothering them, right? I'm bothering the team because like now I'm the crazy guy with the ideas. They're like, well, the founder, the CEO, whoever, the marketing, the words have weight, right? Like if your boss like suggests something, you're like, oh, okay, should I do this or not? But then also we might never follow up on it ever. There's no system for tracking it. But then also we might be stuck 3 months from now and I'll be like, well, damn it, why didn't we do one of those things that I suggested? I love the idea. There's this book, High Output Management by Andy Grove, who ran Intel. And he talks about how like, this is an old school book, but he's like, one of the things that I like to do for one-on-ones is to keep like a file away for like the one-on-one notes that I'm going to have with my team members, because during the week and during the month, Adam and I might need to talk about something, but I don't need to interrupt him with that right now. I just file it away and let's talk about it later. And so I love the idea of like filing all these ideas away, but then actually having everybody like, let's go through, let's sort these. And you said you would pick like 2. Like, did you come up with that number to force you to do it? Because where I would get stuck is how do I get the team to go and do these things now? Like, everyone's always busy doing other stuff. They already got enough on their plate. How do I get them to go and do these ideas?
Yeah. So there's 2 things to respond to what you said. Number one, if you have those CEOs, CMOs who are firing tons of ideas off you, like you could ask them to like, hey, can you put this in a doc, right? Most probably aren't. And so I think one of the tricks I learned is when you get those requests, you don't have to have a big back and forth there. The simple thing is like, I'm going to add it to our one-on-one doc and we'll talk through it on Thursday. Or I love this idea. I'll add it to our backlog of ideas. We're reviewing them next Friday. Join the meeting if you want, right? So it's like, I'm not ignoring your idea. I'm also not telling you we're doing your idea, right? And so I think part of it is like, it's great to have that kind of funnel of data. And I think marketers struggle with that with salespeople too, where it's like sales keeps throwing ideas at me. It's like, yeah, but it comes from a good spot. And I think, and there are good ideas in there. And so I think like having that outlet or a spot to put them is key. And I think the other thing is when you think about the team load and team management, like you said, you don't want to give them a full-time job of experimenting things. And really, so we tried to limit it to 2 because we felt like, okay, that's a digestible amount of things we can test. And sometimes it was like, hey, we're crazy busy because we have these things going on. We're about to launch an event or we have this trade show this week. And so it'd be like, okay, we're not going to launch anything with the event team, but this week we're going to try out these 2 things on paid, right? And the beauty is because you have 100 ideas in a backlog, you can pick and choose kind of which ones you're going to try and experiment. And
this stuff would be in addition to like the core job, right?
Yeah. So Kyle Lacey has that good framework. I think I may have stolen this from him a while back, where he basically says he allocates like 20 or 30%, I forget what the number is, of his budget, marketing budget, to experiments and like brand initiatives and things basically he doesn't have to report back on. And so part of it's like you have to allocate some of your budget to say like, hey, this is an experimentation budget. And I think where marketers struggle is, how do I convince my CEO that I need like this budget and we're not really going to expect results out of it? It's like a weird.
Well, I think that's why that rate that percentage is important, because I have found that they don't care if you say like, oh yeah, we're going to do a bunch of like random stuff with podcasting. Then it's like, okay, but like, where are you spending that money from and how much time is that? But if you frame it, if we just take the Kyle Lacey number, if we say it's 30% or 20%, we're going to say, hey, 80% of our people and budget and time is going to be spent on like doing this stuff that is meant to hit our goals today. I need 20% to ensure that we're going to hit our goals tomorrow. That's how I would think about it. Because I've made my first time as a marketing leader, I was so focused on and was under so much pressure to hit the number, hit the goal like right now, this quarter, this year, that all of a sudden, when you get the plan for next year and the CEO wants to grow the company 50%, you can't just take your existing channels. And you know this, you worked at G2 during a really high growth period, right? You can't just take the spreadsheet and like drag your existing channels and like just get more demos and hand raisers from it. Like you have to be placing these next bets. But then at the same time, those things need time. And so you might need to be like podcasting for 6 months or testing into Reddit or LinkedIn or whatever the strategy is, because it's going to need to ramp. And so a mistake that I made was I didn't carve out that stuff until it was too late. And then I would go into the year and I'm like, shoot, we got to find 2 or 3 new channels when it's like way better to have been testing them. Do you get what I'm trying to like articulate with that?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people too. That's why you see so many like sales and marketing plans that are completely backloaded in the second half.
We're just going to figure this all out later. Yeah.
Like, oh, we need 6 months to figure this out. And so like you look at it and you're like, what the hell's happening in July that we suddenly start doubling?
Which then, oh man, I've gotten in this problem too. Then July is actually a historically slow time in B2B because everybody's out on vacation or doing stuff for their kids. And so like things are way down. And so not only did you miss the number in July, but it was actually a 50% miss because it was a 50% bigger number. You can't just draw a straight line for the year. Oh yeah, been there.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I feel like any marketing leader has made that mistake at least once in their career. So I think, yeah, your point of like
a CEO that I work for was like, I never want to hear that it's July ever again. I don't care because I know there's 30, however, is the 31 day. There's 31 days in July. I don't care that people take 10 days off for 4th of July here in the US. I don't want to hear about it. And I'm like, all right. So now we have a month that has effectively 20 days, maybe 14 selling days in it. We got to hit the number. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. And I think that's your point about planning for the future, right? I think part of it is if you think about being able to ship 2 new experiments a week over the course of a year, or every 2 weeks, let's say in a 2-week sprint, over the course of a year, I've just launched 52 new experiments. So if you say like, okay, take another company that typically moves slow and they're trying 2 new things a quarter, they've launched 8. And so if you say, what's the success rate of any of these? And just say 25% of the experiments are actually going to be successful and turn into something meaningful that we can try to scale. At the end of that year, I now have, 12 things I can do if I launch 50 something tests. And if I launched 8, I have basically 2 things, right? And so like this, and that compounds really quickly, I think, right? And so we found like direct mail worked really well, and we were launching tons of direct mail campaigns in our ABM strategy at G2 because it was working. So we've tried tons of different kind of experiments that have had meaningful impact that we launched with like a very minimal test that we are able to scale into much bigger programs.
So what I also am getting from this is like it's great. So you got to have ideas. You got to have a framework to track and measure ideas. You actually have to implement them. I do think forcing I just like okay, you made up 2, right? Let's just go 2 because we're going to try. It's going to force us to try new things. It's like, you want to, my wife and I want to go out on a date. We just have to go pick a new restaurant because we want to try it. We want to try and find some new place that we like. You set 2, that gives you a rhythm to do it. But then I also think you mentioned the most important thing is also to be intentional about carving this out. This is going to be 20. We're going to spend 20 or 30% of our time and budget testing new channels. That's a huge unlock for me because I've never, without a framework to figure out why, it's like, well, then we should be doing this or we should be doing this. It gives you something to lean on. It's a guardrail for doing that. So, all right. So that's one thing. We're talking about how to help you develop a better B2B marketing strategy. This is new ideas, but let's talk about the core business for a little bit here. So for most of the people that listen to this, they are working at companies where I'd say there's either one or two motions, and some companies have both, right? One of them is going to be what we could call product-led growth. This could be product-led, it could be free trial. I'm going to lump them all in. We're trying to drive people to go do something specifically right
Yeah.
now, like sign up for our free video product or go use Apollo, data tool for free up to X limit, right? Then we have other people that work at companies that are more sales-led motion, where like go get a meeting from sales, right? Do you have any experience in the sales meeting bucket? And can we talk about some things that you've seen be able to drive the needle and move the needle on driving demos? I think this is where a lot of people get stuck, myself included, is like what's in the seat? How do we drive more demand in that part of the business? And what are some ways that we can think about a strategy to like investigate what might be wrong, what might be broken, and go try to fix it?
Yeah, for sure. So I have experience in both, right? G2, I supported a 120 person sales team. Help Scout, we were product led, 90% of the revenue. So it's definitely different motions like you talked about. I would say for the demo piece of it, I think there's two things that typically go wrong. One is marketing needs to make sure they're following the full funnel, right? And not stopping at like we passed over MQLs, and like really understanding what's actually driving the revenue for us, right? Because a lot of times people always think we need more. And then you go in, and if you actually just look at the funnel all the way through, it's like, man, it's not optimized at all. It's broken in so many different spots, right? It's taken BDRs 5 days to follow up with people, or our close rates are dropping because we hired 5 new sales reps and we're giving them the same leads that we're giving our best reps. And there's all kinds of things there. And so I would say like the first thing is analyze your funnel and see where you have holes, because I guarantee you there's definitely holes. And when I say funnel, it's not just the marketing funnel, it's like all the way through. I think the other things that I've seen work really well for driving demos is you have to understand people don't naturally want a demo of the product, right? Like I don't.
This is where I'm kind of getting. This is what I was trying to get at. It's like this fundamental thing. Like I don't want a demo. You don't want a demo. I want one if I really have a pain.
Yeah.
I'll give you a perfect example. We're giving out equity to everybody that works at Exit 5. I've been running the business as like an LLC by myself for the last couple of years, but now we're like restructuring the company to bring in employees. I have to go, I had to do a bunch of legal work. We have to create a cap table. So I need cap table software, but I also need to get a 409A valuation. And so Carta is a company that does that. And so I reach out to Carta and I have a demo on Monday. I don't want to do that, but I have to do it, right? I have a need for my business. And so I just literally before talking to you, I got an email from the SDR asking me a bunch of qualifying questions. I didn't roll my eyes once because I need it. This is how many people are going to be on the cap table? What's your revenue? How many employees? That was not annoying to me because I have a pain. This is where it all breaks down though. So of course I'm going to take that demo, right? But how do we drive that as marketers? And like, how do you have empathy for like 95% of the people? Like I love that 95-5 rule, right? 95% of people are not going to be in market. I'm in market for Carter right now. So I'm probably going to buy that. How do we do things that are going to drive hand raisers? And then you get into the whole other side of it is like all the incentives inside of the company are misaligned. Marketing's measured on MQLs, which is just a content download, which is not going to drive pain. Like this is the root cause of a lot of the strategy stuff, right?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to kind of go about doing it. One is from a demand kind of capture, right, or people want to call it these days, is like the 5%. How do we get the 5%? And that's where you have to understand, like, that's where paid search comes in. And I think those types of campaigns, content.
Would you think about your market and would you think about that? Is that 95-5 something you would think about and like realizing we're not marketing to everybody and say, okay, we're going to do this for this segment and this for this segment? Like, do you think about the stages of awareness someone's going to have with your product?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely think you do. I think you have to understand certain campaigns are focused in on driving conversion, and it really should be dollar in, dollar out. Like if I'm if I'm bidding on a keyword like best 409A software or whatever you're trying to do, like that should be driving conversions for us if it's not brand building. And so I think bucketing and understanding some of your campaigns, what's helping us build brand and build awareness, and then what is helping us actually drive conversions. And so I think the second thing about like the 95% is, to quote the Little Mermaid, you want to be where the people are, right? And the people aren't on your website. And so I think part of it is like marketers just think about their website as the sole source of like, we have to optimize this. And it's like, you probably didn't, your immediate visit wasn't to Carta's website, I'd be willing to bet, right? You probably pinged a few other founders, like, hey, how did you do this? Maybe you asked your accountant. You asked probably other people that you knew. Maybe you're in a Slack group that you asked. And so you have to be really active on all the other kind of areas people are exploring. And you have to understand, like, where are our buyers exploring? Are we selling to marketers? And so they're in all these Slack communities, and that's where this is happening. And try to get a better understanding of like, where are your buyers today and where are they spending their time? And you want to be there. So if they're listening to podcasts, if they're doing all these things, you have to figure that out for yourself.
That's really well said. Yeah. I have the Little Mermaid playing in my head now.
It won't go away.
I feel like there's multiple options, and I think where marketing is hard is like, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, but we have limited time, resources, budget, team members. Maybe at a marketing team like Salesforce size and levels, there's going to be hundreds of verticals, and you have somebody focus on each of these areas, right? But don't you feel like this is where you have to make some bets and make some decisions? And like, I think this is where the strategy and the planning is actually really important. I have liked to have a couple slides that says, here's basically our hypotheses. Here's how we're going to do marketing. Like, here's how we think people buy. Here's what we're going to do. And so therefore, this year, this half a year, we're going to focus on these 5 plays, and we're going to try to do them.
Yep, agreed. I think that's a big, you can't say yes to everything, right? And I think like back to the idea of like early stage startups and even like first time kind of marketing leaders, like you get those Slack messages, at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, and you're like, oh crap, I guess we better do this. And suddenly before you know it, you're doing 50 things and none of them well. And the reality is like, you have to be proactive and lay out the strategy for exactly what you said. Here's why we think these are the bets we want to make, right? And we're going to go all in on, these channels or these things. And here's our strategy. I always love to include a slide of other things we considered and why we're saying no right now, right? And so it's like, I'm not saying we're never going to do a newsletter. I'm saying like this year we're not doing a newsletter, this quarter even we're not doing a newsletter, because our focus is these 4 things.
Well, I think that just shows like ultimately you're presenting this plan to the company. Well, I think you need to socialize this plan. So you're going to show this plan to the CEO, to the rest of the company. The company should know your marketing strategy, because you want to show them that you've done your diligence and that you're aware. It's not like, hey, we're not doing events because we don't know that they exist.
Yeah.
But it's hard. Here, the thing that I always struggle with was like, we have decided that we're not doing industry trade shows as a channel right now, not never, but just for right now. And then all of a sudden, someone sees a LinkedIn post and like it gets the VP of sales, and it's like, man, we should have been at SaaStr this year. We should have, but we're not. We've decided that we're not spending that money this year, and we're doing these things instead. Okay, that's a different conversation than like, oh shoot, we had no idea this was going on. This wasn't a relevant play for us. But I really am pushing people that listen to this to like the sign of a good marketing leader. I know right away is like, can you articulate how the company gets customers and your marketing strategy? This is like the fun part of the job to me. This is like, it's like a little bit of art, a little bit of a science, right? You're taking the data, you're making some opinions, and you're saying, all right, I think these are the puzzle pieces that we're going to use. These are the chips we're going to use. Let's go try to do this. And we're going to adjust and learn on the fly. But if you can't tell me what the buyer's journey looks like for your company, and then what your marketing strategy is, like your marketing strategy is really just a set of bets, right? It's a hypothesis on how you think you're going to be able to go get customers.
Yeah, 100%. I think the other thing like you touched on, which is like, you have to socialize these plans. At the first time your head of sales is seeing the marketing strategy, is that like the company kickoff to start the year, like you've screwed up as the marketing leader, right? You want them completely bought in. You want them as excited or more excited than you are about the plan, right? You want them poking holes in the plan in private. Like that's the time to have those conversations, not like you said 2 months after. And it's like, well, if I could have told you if you had asked me that we should have been at these events or we should have been doing these channels, right? You need everyone bought into your plan before you roll it out. And let's be honest, like my best ideas I always stole from sales. I love stealing from sales. Right. Like I would always ask the sales team, like, what did you think of that campaign? How were those conversations? Like we would include them in our brainstorming sessions. We would ask like a BDR to join to have them throw out ideas. And then we would steal the idea, execute it, and be like, marketing's great.
I think the only reason you don't is when you're fearful about what they're going to say.
Yeah. Yep.
And you're fearful that they're going to tell you that marketing is having no impact and they don't need any help. And so we don't bring them in. But when you can create a culture where like those two teams are partners, the goal of the company is to close customers, and you're going to use sales and marketing to get there, and you're going to each work together. That's what makes for a healthy mix.
Yeah. And you can't be afraid. Like I think part of it too is like there's tension back and forth between sales and marketing leaders, right? Because then marketing will be like, well, sales isn't doing their job or sales isn't doing this. And I've always had a relationship where like I actually want all the feedback. I don't care if you tell me this campaign sucks. I want to know that. I don't want to keep running a campaign that sales hates and isn't driving any revenue. If you are getting early signs of that, tell me. Now, the way you deliver it might suck. We could talk about that. But like, I also will tell you because you're telling me like, hey, sales is dropping the ball here. Like, right? Like you wanted to host this dinner in, Boston, and the sales team hasn't invited a single person to it. Right. And like, we have this booked and paid for. And so I think you open yourself up to have those conversations and push it back. And that's a healthy relationship when you can have.
I love that. This is for people listening, like you got to take on that attitude, and you can hear it in his voice. I'm just taking notes. You got to take on that attitude as a marketer. You got to take on the, like, I want the feedback. I want the feedback from sales. Do you want the feedback from sales? Do you really? Because I think of it as like, we're making a dish. They're selling that dish. Someone's eating that food and they're like, I'm not eating this, or I'm not even going to present it to somebody. Wouldn't you want to know? Because everything is a waste. The stuff that you shop for was a waste. The grocery list was a waste. You taking the time out of your day to go shopping, you cooking, the prep, all that stuff was a waste, right? There's so many things that you guys want us to do. There's 100 channels you want us to do. I want to know what's not working so we can stop doing that. Same way I want to know, a huge question that comes up in our community, Adam, is like, I feel like we create so much damn collateral and content for sales and they don't use any of it. I've been answering this question all morning. I just did a webinar on this, but I want to hear, it's like, since we're riffing on this topic, how would you get at the root cause of that question right there?
So my first question would be, did you ask them the content they actually wanted? Or are you just creating content? And then the second follow-up question would be, how do you plan on using this content? And then I think part of the discussion, if you are doing that work after the first quarter where they didn't use your first 3 things you asked them to create, you can have a conversation with the sales leader and be like, hey, last quarter, your team demanded we get these. It's been used 5 times. So we're not going to be creating the next 3, right? Until we actually start seeing usage from these kinds of things. So it's a waste of our time. But I think like you have to really ask sales, like what do they need? And I think a lot of times, I don't know if it's ego or fear. I feel like sales kind of has this vibe, or marketers have this like fear of sales. Like they're too afraid to like talk to them. Like they're like, I don't know, going to get beat up or something. And it's like, you don't have to be afraid of sales. They might be harsher and they're more blunt and willing to say things, but like you can't be such a flower that you're too afraid to hear that feedback.
Well, it's hard. It's human nature. It's like, my daughter makes me a drawing. And I'm like, she's like, do you like this, Dad? And obviously I'm not going to say no. Right. But at work, you're like, this is shit. These leads suck.
You call this coloring in the line?
Get out of here. Nobody's going to read this. But at work, it's the same thing. Like, yeah, it's hard, man. We just spent a videographer on our team, just spent 60 hours making 5 videos, and we put them all up on YouTube, and each one of them has 11 views. Like that sucks. That sucks to feel that waste, right? And it's like we spent 3 weeks making a deck for sales that no one has even ever looked at. But you hit on the answers. Like you got to peel back all the layers and say, like, let's make this together. I was talking this morning and I used the example of my daughter would come home from school and I would take her lunch out of her bag, and all of her food would still be in her lunch. I'm like, you didn't eat any of your lunch. And she's like, Dad, you packed me all the things that I don't like. I was like, all right, damn it. We're going to go make your lunch together. You pick out, like, let's work on this together. You help me make your lunch. I'm not going to let you eat, fruit roll-ups and everything for lunch. There's some guardrails here, but like, let's pack a good lunch that you want. Come home the next day, she eats the lunch. Why? Because we made it together. It's the same exact thing. Like, you have to, as a marketer, be like, I'm here to help you close deals.
Yeah,
Do
exactly.
you have that mindset? I'm here to help you to close deals. What do you need? Okay, cool. Oh, interesting. Yeah, actually, we could give you that. Okay, we need this one pager. And then I've also found that like they're going to use way less than they actually need anyway. They don't need 100 unique pieces of content. It's going to be like 3 or 4 things that they use all the time.
Yeah. Sales is also, marketers have to understand sales is also very reactive, right? Like the same thing, like you said, it sucks. Is like, if I just got off 2 back-to-back phone calls and they're like, yeah, we're not going to move forward. Like, we weren't that impressed with like, the customers you already have, or, the case studies, or whatever feedback they get, then they probably immediately ping marketing is like, we just lost 2 deals because of this. This is a huge problem. It needs to get addressed ASAP. And it's like, yeah, but those were 2 deals out of 1,000 opportunities we had this quarter, right? Like, it's not that big of a deal. And so I think like you have to understand, like, I would always push back and ask for data and say like, okay, can you show me the deals that we haven't closed because of this, right? Or like put some of the questions back onto them. What I found is like sometimes they just will be like, yeah, you know what? I looked at it. It's not that big of a deal. Or I thought about it more. It's not that big of a deal. You can't just react to them either. And so I think that's a big thing. And then I think 2 other things that you touched on is like building it with them goes so far. Like you should have them in like, what would be in this presentation, or what would be in this white paper that you want? Like, let's build the outline together. Like, what are the key points we want to touch on, to make sure that it's actually like what they're looking for. Because I think a lot of times it's like, we need a white paper on this, or we need a case study on this. And then you find out the reason sales isn't using it. It's like, well, it sucks. It doesn't actually talk about the things we wanted to talk about, right? And so they're still like not getting it all the way. And then I think the other thing I'll just touch on is I think you should be beta testing campaigns and things with the sales teams too, right? Like I would always pick like Danny Reed, who was like our best salesperson at G2, or someone else, and be like, hey, we want to run this campaign. We're going to do like a super small batch of leads through it. Can we send them to you to test and figure out like, is there anything here before we roll it out to the other team? And now you have like a champion where it's like, oh, why is he getting this program, or why is he getting these leads? Like, I want those leads, right? They hear one good conversation, and it kind of creates this effect where like there's actually demand now internally for the things marketing is doing, which is where you want to be.
All right, what have I not asked you so far that you want to hit on? What's in your wheelhouse right now that we should hit on before we go soon?
Yeah, I think the big thing I'm spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about, right, is like I think speed is one of the things, and we talked about it a little bit when we talked about like the planning and all that sort of stuff. But I think one of the big things I see consistently is marketers getting hung up and on terms of like launching things, right? And kind of waiting till it's perfect. And I think it's faulty on so many levels, because I think fundamentally you'll never know it's perfect, and it never will be perfect, because like V1, whether it takes you 6 months to build and launch or 1 week to build and launch, you have to get those learnings, right? And so there's no guarantee that my 1 week version isn't going to outbeat your 6 month version. And so we would see this like with creative teams, where everything has to go through our creative team. And I'd always say, well, it's a test, and then just hide everything under like it's a test, because like I don't want to wait 3 weeks to get an ad creative that I don't even know if it's going to work. I don't even know if it's the right audience. Like we just want to launch something fast, and so I think hiding everything under the idea of a test, which it is, helps you move a lot faster. And I think back to our point of like, and the name of the game to me is like iterations and speed, and how quickly you can get better. Because the same thing we talked about earlier, where it's like company A does, 8 new tests in a month or a year, and company B does 52. Not only have they gotten more channels to understand, they're so much further along in understanding what works, right? Like they have such a better handle. Like if you think back to like your event, Dave, that you ran, right? Or you're running in Vermont, like when you do it again next year, you have a bunch of things that work. already, right? Like you have like these plays and these things of how to build interest and speakers and all these things that you know are going to work well for you because you've done it once already. And so I think getting those learnings helps you so much understand what moves your actual buyers and what gets them to take action. And I think that's a huge unlock for a lot of companies they're not tapping into.
Yeah, I love I love that. And just going back to like customer driven insights, that is kind of like the whole game. And I've made a living basically from listening to gong calls and being active on social media and understanding that content flywheel. And so like at the companies I've been at, I'm not an SEO expert, I'm not an ABM expert, but I'm very good at content and audience building and understanding the audience of that company and that content. And so it's like, oh, how can a conversation on a podcast give me 2 ideas for next week's webinar? And then I'm on a webinar and like, oh, I see chat light up. This is the stuff that you don't get in a spreadsheet with data, right? I see chat light up when we talked about a certain thing. Oh man, we should really go and do something like that. Oh, that's how we bridge the gap to find buyers, by the way. It's like marketing is this game of like giving people what they want and building a relationship, getting them to know, like, and trust you so they will buy from you. What we have available to us with digital marketing today, because of content, because of social media, because of the open web, because of being able to record calls on tools like Gong and listen to them, is like customers are basically telling us what they want. Not always directly, not, sometimes there's the literal version of like on a Gong call, this customer says, I wish your product did X. But there could also be the other example, which is like you find some subreddit about some like niche topic that you're interested in. You're like, all these people like are kind of interested in this. I bet we could go and create something for them. Like all of the signals are out there today. The marketers of like, 60, 70 years ago would kill to have the data and information that we have today. How can you use that? The challenge is exactly what you said though. Can you move fast with those insights? Can you be okay with shipping something that's not perfect? Can you send out an email to get a signal? When I first started talking about our event, we actually hadn't even committed to doing it yet. But I'm fortunate to have an audience on LinkedIn. We have a large email list. We started talking about the event and like more than enough people that we already would have had seats for anywhere. Like, if you do an event, I'm in. So that de-risked the whole thing. So it's like, okay, let's go do an event. And that's huge. And yeah, obviously not every company is going to have that type of audience, but you can find small little pockets. And I think that's what's really fun about marketing to me.
Yeah, I think like pre-launch, I love the idea of pre-launching stuff. We do that a lot for companies and stuff where it's like, hey, before we spend 3 months developing this free tool or whatever, why don't we just create a wait list for it, right? And then announce that we're doing this. If we get 4 people who sign up and that's it, then let's just tell those 4 people, oh, for reasons, whatever, we decided not to move forward, or just don't do it. And now you just save so much time and all this effort on something that's like nobody was going to engage with this, right? And so
yeah, totally. Like, or do maybe you want to do a dinner, right? Dinner is a great play for like one of these enterprise companies, right? Great. There's no cost to trying to do the dinner. Try to set it up. Can you get 15 interesting people together in New York? Okay, we tried. We got 3 responses. Well, then don't do the dinner.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just finding these little pockets. So what new things are interesting to you? So you seem to be a guy, you're in the growth space. You're pushing your team and people you work with to try new ideas. Obviously, I know some of this stuff is timeless. The strategy stuff is gonna keep coming back around even in a world of AI. But what new stuff is interesting to you?
Yeah, I'm super interested in kind of how people are trying to build out outbound engines, automated outbound, all the signals we are getting now, right? There's tons of like data signals coming in now, I feel like, with people tracking buyers on their website and then running all these automated campaigns and messaging through AI. And I think it's a super interesting concept to me because it's basically you're trying to build out an engine using all this data and insights. And I don't think anyone's nailed it perfectly yet, but I think it's one of those things where at some point it will probably get there. And so I think like I play around a lot with like new tech all the time just to see like what's interesting to me. And so there's a few tools.
What tools are there any tools specifically that you're playing around with right now that are interesting?
So one tool that's really cool is Sybil. It's like a call recorder, similar to like Gong and stuff, but it uses AI and it does like a transcript for you in terms of like, here's Dave's pain points, here's the Dave's things Dave cared about. It'll create a to-do list for you. It integrates with Slack, so it'll just push your to-do list right into Slack. And so I'm really interested in that in terms of it'll like give you sentiment and all these kinds of things. And also uses AI to create follow-up emails off the conversation. So super cool because like it doesn't get you 100% of the way there, but if I click like generate email, it creates a draft for me that's like 80% of the way there, right? And then I can just clean it up and send it out. And so that's been a super interesting tool to play around with.
I love that. Everybody's like, there's two camps. There's either like people who want to automate, who are like, this AI is the greatest thing ever. It's going to help marketers so much. And there's like, no, I hate this. So never replace humans. And I think what you said is a really important nuance to it there. You're like, it's getting me to 80%. I'm still going to hop in and like add the real touch to it. But like this week, I needed to set up a new landing page for a webinar that we're doing. And I was sitting there and I was like, man, I got to write this. I got nothing today. I was like, oh, no. I got ChatGPT. So I went into ChatGPT. I gave the webinar the details. I said, hey, and I have ChatGPT set up with like custom instructions so it knows what I do for work, the business, whatever. And I said, hey, we're doing a webinar on June 25th with this company called Knack. They do their email design tool. The speakers on the webinar are me, this guy Jay, this guy Pierce. Here are their bios. We want to do email teardowns. We want to get people to submit their emails, blah, blah, blah. I just bullet. And then I said, can you write me up a webinar copy? 2 seconds, back. Writer's block solved. Now, did I just take that copy and paste it and use it? No. I like, this kind of sucks. This is really corny the way this was written. I'm going to rewrite it. But like in 5 minutes, I'm able to create landing page copy that in the past I would have like blocked half a day. Like I got to bang out half a day of landing page copy. I think those use cases are really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, there's some other interesting ones in the growth space too. Like Optio is a company, they can sit on top, you can connect your Google AdWords accounts into it and like or Bing ad accounts. And they can basically read your data and then they make recommendations on your ad account. So they might say like, hey, you've spent $50 on this keyword and you've driven 0 conversions off of it. Do you want to add it to your negative keyword list? Or they'll say like, hey, you're underbidding on this keyword. Do you want to make some adjustments? So it's basically like digesting what you would manually do in AdWords. And so it's not going to help you get AdWords up and running and define maybe your keywords. But like once you're there, it's a really cool tool to, I think, help you try to figure out like, how do I optimize this just on a regular basis? And same thing, they have like a generator in there. So it's like, generate me 10 headlines, right? Like every person who's ever run an AdWords campaign knows like the pain when you go in and it's like, okay, add your 10 headlines. And you're like, okay, and your 30 versions of the copy. And now with the responsive ads, just pulling it all in. And so, it makes it really easy to just give you, like you said, okay, generates me 10 headline ideas. I'll go in and tweak them and change some of the words around to make it sound more like I would want, but it quickly generates those for me versus me being like, what's another way I could say like grow your revenue?
Yeah, I think that's huge. And especially like in marketing, we're so often repeating the same. We're like half of the job in marketing is like to say the same thing in a different way.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's exactly where like AI can be really great. All right, Adam, good to see you, man. Good to hang out with you. I got a bunch of notes. Go to LinkedIn, connect with Adam, follow him there. He's founder of Growth Union. They help B2B SaaS companies scale fast and efficiently. I like the way he thinks about marketing. I hope we could give you some ways to help you break through the little funk you might be in right now. Get smarter about strategy, think like a marketing leader. My number one quote from today is that it's not dead, it's just harder. And I think if you know that challenge, you can be set up for success. So Adam, good to see you. Go enjoy the rest of your evening over there in the UK, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Exit.